Hi everyone. So in this video, I'm going to be going over like the general timeline. Now keep in mind this is for the recruiting cycle of this is how it was for the recruiting cycle of the summer associate for 2026, right? So like these exact dates or this exact timeline isn't like what it will likely look like all the time. So if you have like a finance club or like a career counselor or something like that, they will be able to help um, around like the true timeline. But this is just kind of like a an overview. And either way, I mean, maybe the dates won't match, but it almost always is in this order, right? So it kind of starts off, and this is specific for like associate level recruiting, so it's not necessarily going to be like super helpful if that's not what you're recruiting for. So maybe kind of skip to another video otherwise. So I try to color code it so that it's a little bit easier for you guys to see. But in mid-August, that is typically when your MBA starts, right? What I would recommend at this point in time, the more prep that you're able to get going into your MBA, the better it is, right? If you know all your technicals before you start your MBA, that will make your job way, way, way easier, right? Throughout the process. Now, that's not the expectation. I think that there was like maybe just a handful of people in my batch that actually had all of that information kind of figured out. But um, it definitely does help out overall. But at the bare minimum, I mean, at the start of your MBA, you need to be kind of decided as to whether you're recruiting for investment banking or not, right? Because things start off really, really early, and if you're not committed very early on, then you can kind of get dropped out of the process pretty quickly, right? So, and the reason for that is early September, that's when the school typically allows banks to start coming to campus, right? So typically, if you're trying to decide between consulting and investment banking, McKinsey and Goldman Sachs, for example, will have their company briefing. So essentially, when where the bank comes to campus and gives a presentation around the company on the same day, on the exact same time, right? So it's not really something that is reasonable for you to kind of co-recruit, because if you don't show up to one of the company briefings, well, typically you're cut from that process, right? Meaning that you won't get an interview for that process if you miss one of the company briefings, right? So early September, the banks start coming to campus. And after, typically what happens in these conversations is that they will sit everyone down in a room. They'll give a quick presentation about why they're like the best bank in the world. And then at that point in time, they're going to have these kind of like these round tables with like five or six people around it, and it's kind of like a happy hour type situation where everyone stands around, and you guys are going to ask really awkward questions to the bankers, and they're going to try to answer them without like things being too weird, right? So I mean, my main advice around this is just like make sure to not be like super awkward trying to read the room, right? And yeah, just don't make it don't make it like a weird interaction for the bankers, right? And in terms of like the company briefings, I think I can just address this at this point in time as well. For these, you want to make sure that you show up business professional, right? So for gents, I can kind of speak to it. For ladies, I mean, you folks can tell me what the equivalent is, but I would go navy suit, maybe a charcoal suit, black shoes, black Oxfords, a black leather belt, and a very conservative tie. Um, no, I wouldn't really do like a fancy like blingy watch or anything like that. I mean, just make sure that you're looking like really, really presentable, and you're going into these company briefings with maybe like two or three questions in the mind beforehand, right? Because there's kind of like two mistakes that can happen at the company briefing stage. One is that the bank finishes up their presentation in 30 minutes, and there's 30 minutes left, and they ask, "Oh, so who has questions?" And then everyone is silent, and it's super awkward, and we do not want that, right? That makes the entire school look bad. Obviously, it also makes you look bad in extension, right? So that's one. And then one is making sure that you don't offend the bankers in some way, right? At this point in time, you're likely not going to get cut from any processes, nor are you going to get a leg up by doing anything exceptional, right? The only thing that could happen at this point in time is that you offend a banker or something of that nature, and you are then cut from that bank, right? So, in the company briefings, make sure that you have intelligent questions, questions that you can't just kind of Google, maybe something around what they just said. You can have some like framework around what questions to ask there, and maybe I'll make like some videos on that as well. But then make sure that you're not really pushing the envelope too hard. So a couple years back from a different school, I heard that someone asked like the following question. I personally think that it was a mistake. There was a particular bank that came to campus, and they had around 18 bankers that came for the company briefing, right? And all of those 18 bankers were essentially white males, right? And there was one white female as part of the group, and she was in an HR function, right? So essentially, the student asked a question, something along the lines of, "Oh, it kind of shows that this particular bank." Doesn't value diversity as much. What are you guys doing to kind of encourage diversity, right? Or something along the lines of, oh, like it's kind of obvious that you guys are mostly like white males. Like, what are you guys doing to encourage diversity? And I mean, sure, that could be a great question, but I mean, it's a little bit too risky at this point in the process, right? And honestly, that's not something that I would ask a banker about directly. That's more of a question to have with maybe second year students or kind of your career counselor or something like that, right? So just make sure that you don't get yourself cut at this point in time from the process because of a question like that or a behavior where you like spill wine on a banker or something, something of that nature, right? But that's kind of the main highlights here. And then pretty soon after that, your coffee chats are going to start. So at a very high level, your coffee chats are these like kind of informal interviews that you're going to have. And if you've had a number of these coffee chats with a particular bank, your probability of getting a interview are like really, really skyrocket, right? And it comes to a point where kind of near the end of the process, you haven't gotten interview invites yet, but you kind of know which banks you're going to get interview invites with just because you've had so many coffee chats with them, right? Now, the next point in the timeline is the Wall Street Trek. Now, the Wall Street Trek typically happens around like kind of mid-October, so you've had the first month of coffee chats. I would say that this period of time in between the Wall Street Trek and when banks first kind of come to campus and your coffee chats start, that is, in my opinion, the most hectic time of this entire process, right? Some folks say that it's kind of later on before the interview prep stage, whatever it might be. I would say this is actually the most, oops, this is actually the most hectic portion because you're having coffee chats with practically every single bank, and it gets pretty hectic, right? After the Wall Street Trek, a couple of banks kind of ghost you, so you have less on your plate, right? So around the Wall Street Trek, this is essentially typically like a 4 or 5 day trip to New York, right? So you and your classmates are going to go to maybe like 10 different banks, right? That your school has really good relationships with, maybe more, maybe less, depending on your school, right? And you're going to typically listen to a company briefing type presentation again, just a presentation around the bank, explaining why they're like the best bank ever. And then you're going to maybe ask some questions. There might be some events, stuff like that, right? So you get to kind of see the building a little bit more. You get to talk with a couple more bankers, and there's definitely a ton of like these circles of death, right? And I would say at this point in time, you definitely can be cut for specific things that you might do wrong on like during your Wall Street trek. If you make like an awkward remark, like something like super awkward, or you kind of say something that a banker doesn't like, or you act like unprofessionally in some way, you definitely can be cut during the Wall Street trek. And there's some banks that are historically known to cut half the class after the Wall Street trek. Right, or even more, right? So some banks only move forward with 20 students out of maybe like 55 um, after the Wall Street trek, right? So the funnel really starts kind of tightening at this point in time, right? And then you're going to continue your coffee chats from the Wall Street trek all the way until the application deadlines. Just make sure that you don't miss these, right? This is incredibly important that you do not miss your application deadline, because you could have had 15 coffee chats with a bank and you didn't apply online, and you're cut from the process. There's nothing that they could do, right? The MD could love you, right? But you're just cut from the process because like on an HR side, like they just can't like onboard you, right? And another thing is for the application deadline, especially if you're submitting your resumes as PDFs, your resume and cover letters, make sure that you start an entire new Word document every single time for each and every like cover letter especially, and make sure that the Word document is saved with the right name, and then when you save it as a PDF, it's saved as a right name. Because a lot of times you might have the wrong, like under properties, you have the wrong name saved. So sure, on the screen it says XYZ Bank cover letter, cover letter. But then when they actually open up the document called XYZ Bank cover letter, it opens and it says ABC Bank, right? Cover letter. And that's not great, right? You don't want that to happen to you. Right. So that's the main thing around like the application deadlines. Just make sure that you're obviously being 100% honest, because obviously they're going to do background checks and stuff like that. But then also making sure that you don't make any like silly mistakes like that. And then there are your interview invites, right? At this point in time, I would say that most individuals start off talking to about like 35 banks, maybe like 30, 35 banks. Um, and by the time that you get to the interview invite stage, if you have three like interview invites, you're in decent shape, right? I would say that you're in pretty good shape. Right? That doesn't mean that like things are guaranteed. Things are like never guaranteed, right? Even once you get the interview offer, right? I mean, at that point in time, sure, like your offer for the summer is guaranteed, but whether or not you're going to be working at that bank full time isn't really guaranteed, right? So if you have typically if you have three interview invites, you're in pretty good shape. But I mean, you could have one and just get an offer from that one, right? But I mean, there's a specific week by which banks have to kind of tell you who they're giving interview invites to and not. Now, that week is not a completely set final kind of date, right? So, sure, they might say that from November 15th to November 31st, right? Or December 2nd, whatever the case is, we're going to release interview um, invites, but then some banks might send it on December 2nd, right? Or they might send it on like December like 4th, right? So I would not freak out if it's November 31st and you haven't gotten your interview invites, as long as like other individuals haven't gotten it either. They typically release the interview invites kind of in bulk, right? And then there are your actual interviews, right? Now, these two can kind of be shifted around based on the year. So, I mean, typically the interview invites come out like very early December, late November, right? But then some interviews happen late November as well, right? Some interviews happen like early December, right? So, um, I would say it's obviously a range, but after you have your interview, you are typically going to hear from them within 24 hours about whether you got the job offer or not. And if you haven't heard from them in 24 hours, I wouldn't freak out just yet. But if it's been maybe like 3 days, then yeah, it's probably not looking great. Right. So that's an overall view on what like the process looks like. So yeah, I hope that's been helpful, and I'll kind of create more videos around like each one of these, going a little bit more into depth around what you can expect. But that's the high level overview. So I hope that's been helpful.